Yeah, I think we'll just start and people will keep on joining in. So I'm moderating the talk today because Professor Ruud Balkenende is not available. And this is our last talk before the summer holidays. And yeah, so we welcome you, René. Thank you very much. And you are Professor of Public and Private Interest at the Erasmus School of Law, and also a member of the European Parliament since 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And you are affiliated to the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats and specialize in European law. And today you're gonna talk about the right to repair. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you also very much for inviting me to this online talk, since also the LDE is obviously very dear to my own heart, as I was myself a coordinator of an LDE center when I moved to the Netherlands. Center doesn't exist anymore, but I know therefore what LDE is, and moreover, this particular center was very supportive also in the preparation of the legislative dossier on the right to repair. Indeed, in 2022, in February 22, I entered the European Parliament and I took over the committees of my predecessor, Evelyn Gebhardt, which was in particular the committee on the internal market and consumer protection. And my very first file as a rapporteur, so where I was responsible on behalf of the European Parliament for the negotiations of this particular file, was the right to repair. And I received here expert input from the center. And there was also a meaningful event in Delft, where we had a couple of sessions where I also was presenting and where I was listening to practitioners on their issues that was detrimental for this legislative file and had its influence, first of all, on the Parliament's position, but therefore then also later on the final result that we now have published in the official journal of the European Union. Therefore, it was clear for me when I received the invitation, I will try to make it possible. And so here I am. The directive got still adopted in the last mandate, and it has now a period for implementing it of 2 years. So we are still running in the period of implementing this into the international law. Therefore, it's now a crucial phase to see what member states have to do, could do, should do in order to make use of this right to repair. Now, when we were looking at the market situation during the legislative process, we realized that many of the core issues that actually repairers, but also consumers are facing when we look at repair, are not addressed by the initial proposal. In particular, the very fact that in some civil legal orders, not the Dutch one, but outside of the Netherlands, we have the very fact that consumers have the full freedom to choose between now it's actually not wrong. Also in the Netherlands, it's a situation that consumers have to choose within the first 2 years after they have purchased the good between repair or a new product. And that combined with a certain kind of marketing strategy that tells us all the time that the newest generation of an iPhone is the disruptive innovation of the last decades, meaning we're actually happy when there is the iPhone of last year that is not working properly because now we can get a new one, which makes it that electronic trash mountains are just rising. And there is basically no incentive for consumers to actually opt for the repair in contrast to a new product. Moreover, you have to turn towards the seller, not towards the producer, if you want to remedy a product that is not working properly anymore. And a seller has good selling qualities, but normally not good repair qualities. So there is also a certain incentive on the other side of the contract, the seller to go for a new product instead for repair. Therefore, we decided that we need to prolong the minimum guarantee period, and that's where the Netherlands is different than other member states, that you have a longer minimum guarantee period if you choose for repair instead for a new product. And implementing this longer minimum guarantee period for repair is going to be one of the major challenges for these legal orders that do not know a situation like in the Netherlands where the minimum guarantee period is not calculated on the basis of concrete years, but differently. Then, of course, and more importantly, we saw once the minimum guarantee period is expired, and from that moment on, repair is not competing anymore with a free new product, but with a cheap new product that normally is precisely designed to not work properly anymore after a certain short period of time. That repair still is not financially attractive enough compared to the purchase of a new cheap product, mainly produced in third countries. And when you then indeed here speak to repairers, they tell you that the price of spare products, of spare parts, is the major issue. And if you then go into details and see what are the prices for spare parts, then you start wondering what is going on here. Why are these the prices? So we managed to include a rule that from the moment of the implementation of the Right to Repair Directive, price controls can be done by public authorities, and prices must, as we then called it in legal English, be reasonable and appropriate. Now that basically means that prices like 800 euros for a new mirror of a car, this is neither is reasonable nor appropriate. So this kind of prices are forbidden according to the new law that is then to be introduced. Moreover, we have elements to request from member states. There's now a duty that member states have to bring in incentives to promote repair. Now, this is something where the Netherlands is already quite ahead. I believe there is still, of course, as always, more that can be done with the promotion of repair cafes, for example. But there is still more that we can do if we look at incentivizing repair. There is especially the matter of financial incentives. Now, the big advantage of repair cafes, obviously, is that we have any spare parts that are available with people that actually know how repair can be done. And here you can create a community in which repair is promoted at reasonable cost. But there is more that can be done. We know the example from Austria and some of the German lenders in which vouchers were introduced that then allowed for consumers to reduce the cost of repair down to zero, and that made it that repair was certainly in the countries like in Austria and Thuringia, where we have a repair voucher of 75 euros, that we could see an increase in the use of repair. The second element is how this kind of funds, financial support mechanisms are designed. When we look, for example, in France, where we do have a repair fund, that looks on paper quite nice. But at the same time, we see that many companies, in particular the very small ones, do not really make use of it, as it is quite a bureaucratic process to have access to these particular funds. And given that we are here not talking about enormous amounts, it is questionable why there is a need to do so. So it is nice to promote that you have a certain amount of money that is reserved in public budgets for the promotion of repair. But if then the access to this kind of funds is limited, difficult to achieve because in particular of bureaucratic hurdles, and then you see that not all of the money is actually used, we see this is not going to work. So if there is a certain idea to promote repair by financial means, it is absolutely crucial that they have low entry barriers. Moreover, if we look at funding structures must be predictable for repair businesses. So having a fund that is a one-off measure that is set up for, I don't know, 6 months, 1 year or so, and after that we do not know what is going to happen, or we have a change in government, it is deleted, there's a new government, it is introduced, and then it is changed again. So predictability is core. If it's not predictable, then of course also the whole sector doesn't really know where to go to. We are looking at a volatile sector that at this moment of time still needs incentives. My prediction is if the right to repair is properly implemented, there's going to be an increase in repair demand. But if, in addition, repair demand is triggered by financial incentives that are then at some moment of time not available anymore, we can also come to steep fall in demand. And if then certainly a very small enterprise or a small enterprise is, when there's a rise in demand, hiring people, and then there is a decline, this company can quite quickly be pushed into an insolvency situation.
René, can I just interrupt you just for a short bit? I think, seeing that maybe, would you mind if the audience would ask questions while you are telling some things? Or you prefer to wait for questions in the end to make it a bit more interactive?
Of course, there can always be, an interruption.
Yeah, usually we wait for the end, but I thought maybe it's a small audience, and maybe to make things a bit more interactive, it would be possible. I'm just asking if you would be okay with it.
Yeah,
okay, so audience, go ahead if you have questions. Okay, then please continue, René.
There is no current question pending. I take it. Okay. So that basically means there needs to be a certain predictability, so that small enterprises want to scale up and manage the risk of scaling up, which is linked to the way of how this financial incentives are designed and are introduced. So this is the whole set on the financial incentives. Then we have another big strand on the repair that is linked to product design. And this is also an element that I recall very well from our event in November 23. That was core on how we look at product design. Now there's just this week that the eco-design, the new eco-design delegated acts for the smartphones entered into force, which also brought new requirements for the repairability of smartphones. And this is, I think, probably an even more important approach. We have new eco-design regulation, clear requirements that it also must include repairability into the new set of delegated acts that are here to be adopted. That spare parts have to be, must be made available for a certain period of time, that the repairability of the product is secured. In some instances for white goods, it is 10 years. And that here we have clear requirements that in designing products, repairability must be included as a feature. And that not when you are trying to repair, it's getting a difficult process, because everything is working with glue and whatever kind of elements we see in the reality of products. A further element is increasing consumer awareness on repairability. Here we talk about repair scores, so that when you are purchasing a product as a consumer with a rather easily readable, accessible kind of label, you know if you buy a product that is easily repairable or not. That allows consumers to include the element of cost in their purchasing decision, that they basically know, okay, do I get a product that is so difficult to repair that when it's over I have to buy a new one? Or is it at the moment of purchase a higher price, but given that it is repairable and that spare parts are available, I know it is going to be, it is going to be available. It's going to be repairable for a longer time. And I saw there was a question in the chat on the used and on the original spare parts. I personally think that in the used spare part market is an enormous potential, and we address this particular matter in the also in the right to repair in the right to repair directive, when we wrote that original manufacturers may not prevent repair. This is a very open notion, admittedly, but there are, of course, many manufacturers that insist on making use of original spare parts and then include certain features in their product that reduce even the usability of the product if you do not use original spare parts but used ones. In the legislative process, we consider this a problem, and we made it clear that this is one of the examples of an obstruction by the manufacturer of the repairability of a product. So we actually want to open the spare part market to the used ones. In certain element, in certain situation, also do 3D printed spare parts. If you look at very at white goods, for example, dishwashers, etc. There are spare parts where the production with a 3D printer does not even cost you €1, but if you try to get an original spare part, it's about €200. So there is no reason in this way of how that is designed. So I personally very much think that there must be even more done in order to allow for used parts to be introduced. The main argument that then from the businesses come is security, that if you use used parts, then the manufacturer cannot guarantee that consumer security is still ensured. I personally am not totally convinced by this argument, since we have a high level of product safety in Europe. When you're using spare parts, it doesn't mean that you are outside of the scope of product safety. We definitely need, of course, training for people that do repair, and that's probably something that on the repair market side has to be addressed, that any sort of qualification labels, or I don't know, must be introduced so that safe and that used spare parts are properly installed. But at the same time, honestly, I do not see any alternative to making repair more attractive than promoting the use of used spare parts. And then we come basically already to the concluding element that I wanted to introduce in my input. It is about what can we do beyond what the current EU policy is providing for. Here I'm quite sure these are elements that are to no surprise to this audience, that we need, in terms of product design, go even step further to what we currently discuss under eco-design. We need to promote modular design. We need to have products like parts, a fair phone, but there are also other tablets already that are going into this direction, that it is a modular design where consumers or repair shops can easily swap certain devices. We need to look at standardization of screws and connectors, in the sense that we need to avoid proprietary fasteners that require special tools. We know I think the EUR coffee machine it is, where you need a special tool in order to open it, that of course you can purchase with them, and that is highly expensive. It is a measure to prevent and obstruct repair, obviously, but I believe we can be more clearer that this sort of things should actually be standardized. We need accessibility to repair manuals. In my eyes, also accessibility to blueprints. After the expiry of the minimum guarantee period, there is actually not much that speaks against having open access to blueprints, where 3D printing by repairers is an option to create certain spare parts. We are not there yet, but I believe this is a core measure that we should have introduced here. And we have to look at the issue of software updates, so that we must ensure that with the new batch of software, products that use software keep up their usability, and that new software updates are programmed in a way that also older hardware with a reasonable lifespan is still be supported. So that would basically be it for all my input on where we stand, looking at the right to repair, looking where implementing measures have to be done, what could still be done. And I believe that would be then a good moment to indeed also enter into the discussion.
I think there's already a question in the chat from Friedrich.
Exactly. So there, I see that the question on proprietary specialized tools and equipment in the automotive repair and dismantling. So this is indeed relating to what I had just said. I do believe that proprietary fasteners and special tools, they are in principle and very general not needed. It is just a measure to obstruct repair. I cannot exclude that with certain products, the safety of the product might require this. This is then beyond my understanding as a lawyer. But therefore, in the automotive, also in the automotive sector, there are many parts that where the safety of the car does not require specialized tools and equipment. And once we are in this particular field, I personally think that is a measure to obstruct repair and should therefore be prevented.
There's another question from Sonia.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I'm currently in the process of conducting a survey on e-bike motors. Because I have an e-bike motor sitting on my desk, which gave out after 790 kilometers. It was just over a year old, and the owner basically just gave it back to the repair shop I go to, and bought a new bike. So the complete bike went to waste because an e-bike motor gave out, in my opinion, way too early. And I noticed that in the Right to Repair Directive for micromobility, the batteries are taken up, and there is attention also to remanufacturing batteries. But the fact that the motor is not included, while of course there's critical raw materials in there as well, if you're talking about the electromagnet, as well as just the fact that if people are throwing out all bikes, because actually, especially for a mid-drive motor, that's the hardest part to reach in a bike. And I know my mom had after that was just over 3 years. Had to pay €1,000 to get the motor replaced, while actually, it was just over 3 years. And if you look at bikes are really an alternative, presented as an alternative to, or e-bikes to cars for commuting to work, then for me it's really a question: how can we bring this to the attention of the EU, and how can we perhaps also try to get this included in the Right to Repair?
This is a very good point. It was also a long time fight until the last night of the trilateral negotiations on the bikes, since I had included the bikes in the annex of products that are for the right to repair after the minimum guarantee period. In my first draft report, it was quite a hassle to have it survive the negotiations within Parliament, and then in the last night of the trialogue, the Council was very resisting. The problem is there the following. I'm just saying what the argument was. That was an argument that unfortunately convinced the majority. I personally was never convinced by it. They basically said that if we are looking at the right to repair after the minimum guarantee period, we can only require that far-reaching rights into the process if at the same time we have an eco-design delegated act that clearly defines which are the repair requirements and which are the spare parts, what is the lifespan, etc. So they basically said we can only have a right to repair if there is an eco-design act that defines the minimum requirements for a certain product. Otherwise, it would create too much uncertainty for the manufacturers if they know there is a right to repair after the minimum guarantee period, but actually do not know what they have to do in order to comply with it. It's an argument that was put forward that unfortunately was convincing to the majority. I personally never found it convincing. Because if the idea is repairability as such, then you basically know what are the elements you have to do. It's about standardized screws, it's about modular design, and it's about many things.
Yeah, because in that sense, I have another Bosch motor lying on my desk, which has a pentalobe security screw that isn't.
Yeah.
I had to order in China to even be able to open it. Okay,
exactly.
Fairly speaking, the newer Bosch motor have just a torque screw, so it is. Yeah,
exactly.
They have made some improvements there, but still, it's yeah. I'm curious.
Therefore, it is really also in abstract terms no rocket science to say what is requested from manufacturers if their product is to be repairable after the expiry of the minimum guarantee period. Nevertheless, that didn't make it into the final point. The Commission nevertheless said, let's say this annex, it is a dynamic one. This annex can be changed also by a delegated act of the European Commission. You do not need to have a legislative process for this. On the bikes, there was the promise by the commissioner responsible during the negotiations that they are currently meaning 1.5 years ago, they were preparing a delegated act on bikes and on e-bikes. And that once they have this delegated act done, they would expand the list for the right to repair also to bikes and to e-bikes. That was the only thing that I got. I have the confirmation from the services of the European Commission that this was not just a promise by a commissioner, but that they really are actually working on it. Since after the European elections, I'm not anymore in the Internal Market Committee. I didn't follow the recent developments, so how far they are with the bikes. But I do know that they want to do something. So that would basically, if the question is what could be done, the Commission can expand it to bikes and e-bikes. They are preparing this eco-design requirements for bikes and for e-bikes. And here, I think the interesting question would be to know where do you stand, when do you intend to adopt it, and what is going to be in there. Since the biggest problem with this delegated act I personally have is this is something that the Commission negotiates with the sector, mainly behind closed doors.
Yeah.
We are going to receive the final result. As Parliament, we can stop it. But if as Parliament we stop it, that means we don't get anything. So therefore, I am afraid that these two arguments that the sector is always putting forward, product safety and intellectual property, will be the ones that will also be put forward by the sector in this kind of talks, and that we get some mediocre kind of compromise where they ensure the repairability, but do not actually go for proprietary special tools like the one that you just mentioned for the Bosch motor.
Yeah, and so I mean, as I said, I currently have a survey out looking at what are average times at or distances after which e-bike motors break down, because actually there's very little data available. A colleague I know at Fraunhofer, they did look at the remanufacturability of e-bike motors. They are remanufacturable. In their opinion, I also know been talking to a remanufacturer in the Netherlands who is starting up a remanufacturing line for Shimano motors. So it is possible, but it looks like there's one survey in Germany where 25 of the respondents indicated that their motor broke down. So batteries were 40%, motors 25%. So it does seem to be a serious issue, because I have from the survey, people they're talking about having to replace it after even within warranty, but also just after 3,000, 5,000. 10,000 kilometers, and if you talking about commuting to work, that's within a year or 2 years of using a bike. So is there any way we can put pressure on the EU Commission, for example, in this regard.
Definitely, I'm quite sure that if this study will have meaningful impact on that, since the moment on where you basically have concrete numbers that show there is something indicate or insinuate that there is something tricky, maybe even fishy with this motor production, and that at the same time you can show that technically speaking nothing speaks against making it more accessible or repairable, then this is something that will have definitely impact. So I think the work that you're currently doing, that can be here of high relevance. And it would then work that has to be addressed to the Commission services that are responsible for this. And I can offer that I can check which unit precisely would be to be addressed for this particular matter, so that they receive this information and that they have it as a material for their negotiation.
That would be great. I hope to be able to have some results this fall. So, yeah.
That would be excellent.
So, thank you.
Any other question? I have a question myself, René. You were talking about financial incentives, and I don't think I heard anything about VAT, which was also discussed during the meetup in 2023. But what about that? Is there something in that direction?
Yeah, so on VAT, we have mentioned the VAT part in a recital of the Right to Repair Directive. That is because the Right to Repair was for consumer rights and not on tax policy. This is a very different legal basis and would require a change of the VAT directive. Yet, there are two ways of how you can deal with VAT. The one is that you include the VAT exemption directly in the VAT directive, which is a lengthy process because changing VAT law requires unanimity. But as it is designed now, it is an option. So member states can on their own also decide that they exempt repair from VAT. Member states are not prevented from doing so. And that is indeed then therefore a core thing that they could do. But of course we know VAT is a major source of income for member states. But if a country such as the Netherlands is serious about promoting repair, besides indeed supporting repair shops or discussing repair vouchers, then indeed making use of the VAT exemption, that would be certainly a major step, a major support for the repair sector.
Okay, thank you. But because what other financial possibilities what are they considering in the Netherlands then to do?
Good question. I'm a German politician, so I can say about discussions that we do have in Germany. I'm a Dutch academic, so I can, in that sense, there is this data where I cannot say much about, and that is Dutch politics. But it's given that we are now on the run towards a new election manifestos have to be adopted. And it would be my recommendation to my sister party, PvdA GroenLinks, to include this sort of elements in their election manifesto. And I mean, this is basically the moment where things could be shaped. Given that the liberal parties have a soft heart for small and medium-sized enterprises, and given what Sonja was just saying about the Dutch infrastructure on bikes and e-bikes and the promotion of e-bikes as an alternative to cars, I think there must be more parties than just PvdA GroenLinks that in their internal logic could include this sort of elements. I could even imagine that even a CDA could imagine to promote repair as a support measure for small and medium-sized enterprises. But it is a niche subject, unfortunately. So it is something that in the process, policymakers might not have on their mind. So it does make sense to remind them. But then I do believe that opposition is actually not that enormous. So I think on this particular topic, I think it's important to bring it into the public debate like probably an op-ed in NRC or in Volkskrant, or at this particular moment of time that reiterates the advantages of repair and the possibilities that there are, could already be helpful. And a series of studies sent to the party leaderships with a suggestion to include measures to promote repair in election manifestos could also be helpful.
Yeah, that's a goal. Thank you. Is there any other question? Maybe I have a last one, and that's about responsibility. Is this also addressed in the right to repair? So once a product has been repaired, who is then responsible for something, for the safety, reliability, but also, yeah, if something goes wrong again?
Yeah, so the question of the liability. We have here the general regime that the liability of course in the after purchase lies first with the seller, who then can move it on to the manufacturer. This cascade is not anymore applicable once the minimum guarantee period has expired, since the seller as the main point of contact isn't there yet. That means we are basically going back to the standard liability relationship, which is the manufacturer is liable for it. But that's the principle. But once, of course, we zoom in, things are getting a bit more complicated. If you have an entire product, and then there's a spare part put in there, and then there is something wrong with the spare part, what is happening with the entire product? The question on the used spare part was asked earlier. If the used spare part is faulty and then triggers a reaction that the remaining part is actually also even more destroyed than it was before, then this general rule needs to be refined. Let's say from that moment on, we have there's no rule in the right to repair. Let me put it like this. And the general rules would then require that we need to look at the spare part itself, to which extent the fault in the spare part was recognizable by the consumer if they did it themselves, or by the repairer if it was a repairer. Then if it wasn't, it has to be seen whether anything in the process, in the repair process itself, was actually leading to this mistake. Then the liability is on the repairer. If not, then the liability lies on the producer of the spare part. If it's a used spare part, then we have the limitation of the liability period, and then we are in the general regime. So I did suggest a discussion back then on the liability of the repair when we were discussing it in Parliament, but that was a bit too much to digest for the colleagues, so that the liability question was not addressed explicitly.
Okay. Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, then no hands, nothing. Okay. Then I would like to thank you, René, for your precious time, as I understand. And yeah, we are Center. We are continuing with the topic. We've built a community around it, and we also have a thesis lab with students in collaboration with several provinces in the Netherlands next year. So yeah, we keep on being very active with it. So it's also a call for Sonia if you have interested students for a thesis lab on repair.
Well, I have two students already doing a project this fall on the e-bike motor. So
good. So that's an open call. And again, thank you very much. And yeah, we'll see you all together then after the summer holidays with a very exciting program, which you will receive in our next newsletter next week. So thank you all and have a very good day. And thank you, René.
Thank you.
Thank you.